This film is highly criticized by the Catholic Church, but gets an Oscar nod for Best Picture. Let's find out why. The story kicks off with Thomas Lawrence, the Dean of the College of Cardinals, arriving after learning of the Pope's death. He meets Cardinal Bellini, who reminisces about their chess games and expresses a desire for the late Pope's chess set. When Thomas asks who usually won, Bellini admits he wasn't the best player. Curious about the Pope's passing, Thomas inquires about the details. Bellini reveals it was a heart attack. They had seen warning signs, but feared that any leaks could spark rumors about the Pope resigning. Seeking more information, Thomas speaks with Wozniak, the Pope's close confidant, who found the body and called the doctor. Wozniak explains he was advised to wait for all details before informing Thomas. As the conclave approaches, tensions rise. Thomas is busy ensuring everything is ready, including checking for eavesdropping. He hopes everyone will feel comfortable in the sealed environment and reassures himself that preparations will be completed on time. Tensions mount as Cardinal Bellini arrives and mentions rumors about his candidacy for Pope, which he dismisses. When Tedesco arrives, Thomas checks on his health, to which Tedesco humorously replies that good health is hard to find at their age. Later, Thomas confides in Bellini about his wish to resign and join a religious order, but Bellini insists his leadership is needed. He reveals that even the late Pope had doubts about the Church's direction, leaving Thomas surprised. Thomas then approaches Father Wozniak, who is ready to confess. However, Wozniak reveals a secret. Tremblay was the last person to meet with the Pope. Thomas questions why this was kept under wraps, and Wozniak explains that he promised Tremblay to stay silent, not anticipating that Tremblay would become a potential pope. Just as tensions reach a peak, a mysterious new cardinal arrives, raising suspicions about his legitimacy. He presents a letter of appointment, revealing that the late Pope had secretly elevated him to cardinal and sent him to Kabul at his request. As the conclave continues, Thomas introduces the newly appointed Cardinal Benitez to the assembly, acknowledging that the reasons for his secretive appointment are known only to God and the late Pope. When Benitez speaks, he leaves a powerful impression, especially on the sisters, by including them in his prayers. Later, the liberal cardinals gather to discuss Bellini's position in the election. Bellini stands firm in his beliefs, advocating against a return to Latin, promoting support for diverse faiths, and pushing for greater roles for women in the Church. While some of his colleagues disagree on the last point, Bellini is resolute, stating he wants to win based on his true convictions. After Bellini leaves, his supporters suggest launching a campaign in his favor, but Thomas quickly reminds them that this isn't what Bellini desires. They argue that those who actively seek power can be a threat, prompting Thomas to reach out to Tremblay regarding rumors of a forced resignation. Tremblay denies these claims and questions Wozniak's reliability due to his drinking. When Thomas asks about Tremblay's meeting with the late Pope, Tremblay refuses to divulge details, insisting it was private. In response, Thomas delivers an inspiring speech about the need for unity, tolerance, and humility in the Church. Quoting St. Paul, he emphasizes the strength that comes from diverse perspectives and warns against the dangers of certainty, which can erode unity and leave no room for genuine faith. He prays for a humble pope who acknowledges flaws and seeks forgiveness. As the first round of voting begins, the cardinals receive instructions on how to cast their votes. The results show Cardinal Adeyemi leading with 21 votes, followed closely by Tedesco with 18, Bellini with 17, and Tremblay with 16. After the first round, they plan to reconvene the next day. Despite the communication ban, Thomas begins gathering intel on the leading candidates, justifying it as a necessary investigation to protect the Church. During a conversation with Benitez, the latter shares that he voted for Thomas, but Thomas expresses his intention to step down after the conclave, feeling unworthy of the papal role. Later, Bellini confronts Thomas, upset by his lack of stronger support. He warns that if neither wins, Tedesco might undo 6 decades of progress. While Thomas notes Adeyemi as a viable candidate, Bellini stresses that Adeyemi's stance on homosexuality is problematic and urges Thomas to pick a side. In the second ballot, Tedesco leads with 35 votes, followed closely by Adeyemi with 34. The third round sees Adeyemi surging ahead with 52 votes. As voting continues, a dramatic scene unfolds in the cafeteria when Sister Agnes creates a stir involving Cardinal Adeyemi. Thomas intervenes, insisting on speaking to the nun. The nun reveals a shocking truth. She had a child with Cardinal Adeyemi when she was just 19, and he was 30. Thomas confronts Adeyemi about the nun's claims, who dismisses it as a conspiracy to undermine his candidacy. Thomas decides to stay silent, but Adeyemi clings to hope despite the damaging rumors swirling around him. Thomas regrets to inform him that these whispers are causing fear and will only spread further. He acknowledges Adeyemi's good character but believes he's not fit to become pope and needs a fresh start. As the fifth round of voting begins, Adeyemi struggles to gain support due to the rumors, while Cardinal Tremblay leads with 40 votes. Without a candidate achieving the two-thirds majority, they plan to reconvene the next day for more voting. Meanwhile, Thomas learns that Cardinal Benitez's medical appointment in Switzerland was canceled. Bellini suggests they should shift their support to Tremblay, since victory seems unlikely. Later, Thomas asks Benitez to stop voting for him, and instead back Tremblay, but Benitez refuses, believing Thomas is the most deserving candidate. Thomas insists he doesn't want the position either, but Benitez sees potential in him. Thomas then approaches Sister Agnes about the sister brought to their facility, but she can't share details, urging him to be patient. He confides in her his desire to resign, but the late Pope wouldn't allow it. Touched, Sister Agnes helps Thomas access the records. Confronting Tremblay, Thomas accuses him of trying to sabotage the election and urges him to step down. Tremblay defends himself, claiming he followed the late Pope's orders and suggests Thomas may be acting out of ambition. Investigating further, Thomas finds documents in the late Pope's quarters that implicate Tremblay and Simony. He urges Bellini to run for Pope, but Bellini declines, fearing it would only aid Tedesco. Frustrated, Thomas circulated a report revealing the late Pope wanted Tremblay to resign, inciting a heated debate among the group. Sister Agnes clarifies that Thomas was only investigating the nun's arrival, which was orchestrated by Tremblay. Adeyemi accuses Tremblay of betrayal, leading to growing doubts about his qualifications. Feeling guilty about their earlier clash, Bellini apologizes to Thomas, admitting his ambition clouded his judgment. He acknowledges Thomas would be a better leader and asks what name he would choose as Pope. Thomas replies he'd pick the name John. Just as the voting process unfolds, an explosion shakes the venue, leaving everyone in shock. Thomas breaks the shocking news to the group. Multiple blasts have occurred, claiming over 50 lives. Tedesco reacts with outrage, blaming the violence on the relativism doctrine favored by liberals. He criticizes the tolerance shown toward Islam in their territory, arguing that they can no longer afford to show weakness. He calls for a leader who understands the grave religious conflict they face and can take decisive action against the threat. In response, Benitez shares his experiences from some of the most dangerous regions, emphasizing that violence only begets more violence. This is his first visit, and he reflects on how the petty concerns of those around him seem insignificant in light of recent events. His heartfelt speech resonates with the audience, gradually winning them over to his side. In the next round of voting, Benitez secures the two-thirds majority needed to become the new pope. When asked if he accepts the role, he responds with a firm yes, choosing the name Innocent. Thomas initially feels a wave of joy at this development, but it quickly dissipates when Monsignor approaches him with unsettling news about Benitez. Monsignor reveals that he received troubling information from the clinic concerning Benitez's medical history. He explains that the late Pope had financed a canceled medical procedure for Benitez, a laparoscopic hysterectomy. Thomas realizes that if this information were to leak, it could force Benitez to resign. Determined to address the situation, Thomas confronts Benitez. He learns that Benitez was unaware of his intersex condition until an appendectomy revealed both male and female reproductive organs. He shares that he initially considered resigning after the discovery, but ultimately chose to embrace himself as God created him, inspired by a sermon Thomas once gave. Moved by Benitez's courage and perspective, Thomas decides to keep his secret, prioritizing loyalty to the late Pope over his own ambitions. He watches quietly as the crowd celebrates Benitez's election as the new Pope, feeling a mix of pride and concern for what lies ahead. The Catholic Church has criticized the movie for misrepresenting the papal election process and undermining the sanctity of the papal conclave. Some Catholic leaders have called the movie anti-Catholic propaganda, and others have called it simplistic and ignorant. What do you think? Let me know in the comments.